it works actually at different levels also within one country. So in Haiti, for example, we're starting to talk to municipalities to build local energy roadmaps, look at really what their energy situation is at the local level, and then employ the same, in the end, the same methodology that we employ at the national level in these countries. India, China are countries that from our perspective are far too large to do it at the national level. So here it is also the state governments, particularly in India, that are about to implement federal goals. So that's where the capacity building from our point of view needs to happen. So we're reaching out to stakeholders there, to groups there that are already active. We're not always the first ones trying to wrap our heads around these problems, but we're trying to be supportive with our analysis, our international best practice knowledge to help move those entities at whatever level forward. We come to a number of interesting results. So while the methodology is always the same, the results, of course, in every country are different. And we can open that up in the discussion what some of those early policy recommendations in countries who are active are. We don't want to leave this behind from the discussion. We just don't have the time to address all of this. So with that brief comment to you, Sheng.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. So how do these roadmap integrate into the climate talks and the topics which are currently discussed down there? So in recent years, just to give the broader picture, many countries have begun developing national strategies that attempt to integrate development, economic growth, and climate change mitigation. These are so-called low-carbon development strategies or low-emission development strategies. And they're designed to help countries set national development and climate priorities. And so although these concepts are often mentioned in the climate talks, there's currently no internationally agreed approach for how to design them, for how, and no consensus on what they should entail. Of course, the Copenhagen Accord says that a low-emission development strategy is indispensable to sustainable development, but so far there's still no common universally accepted set of elements that should be part of those low-emission development strategies. The Cancun Agreement recognized that they should be supported, that developed countries need to provide incentives to developing countries, and they created a registry for NAMAs so that they could match them with international finance, but concrete funding and funding sources are still not very clear. So what Worldwatch sustainable energy roadmaps do, Alex, could you, next slide? Yes. So what they do is that they can provide the basis for low-carbon development strategy in the energy sector, which is a leading source of greenhouse gas emissions and a critical component of a country's economy. So what we have done in our pilot project in the Dominican Republic is based on the country's requests and demands. We've developed this methodology that entails many components of what the country sees as being a low-carbon development strategy for their energy sector. It describes the pathway to the implementation for the measures which are planned in the plan. So these sustainable energy roadmaps serve mainly two purposes. The first is that they provide support for the planning of their energy sector with international finance through technical assistance. As you've seen the map that Mark has shown, the maps provide comprehensive geo-referenced data for solar and wind resources that can really help the planners at the Ministry of Energy or at the Ministry of Environment to plan the concessions for investors. And but these maps, in the end, are owned by the partner countries, so they're completely anchored in the national policy process. And the second thing, you see the arrow coming from the bottom, is that these plans provide also international transparency on the country's action. We do a comprehensive evaluation of the country's policies in the energy sector, and at the international level, these kind of roadmaps provide valuable transparency on the country's action.
Thank you very much, Sheng.
I'm curious to know how you go about putting boundaries around the technologies that you may involve in your roadmaps?
For example, Haiti. We found that there's a lot of work already underway on individual technologies and a lot of results. But the government, the first thing that they asked us was like, can you help us scope what's already out there in terms of information, in terms of analysis of individual technologies, because they didn't have an overview. And many groups come in, assess, do their assessment work, and leave. I don't want to give any names here. I think everybody's really trying their best. What often lacks is really a registry of different things that are going on, and that's really what we're trying to do. So we're trying not to replicate any work that has been done, but look at what's done first to start with there. So this initial scoping helps us to get an understanding of where most potentials are. Where are the potentials in the area of energy efficiency? Where are the potentials in the area of different renewable energy resources? Where are also the grid potentials? Is it on-grid solutions? Is it off-grid microgrid solutions? That's really then in consultation with stakeholders and governments what we're starting to work on and what we mostly focus on. Did this answer your question? Good. Other questions?
Hello, Judy. Solon assignment for 50/50, SABC TV2. My question is, after reading Georges Monbiot's book called Heat, in which he proved that you could produce all the energy for the UK without any fossil fuel, which is what you were talking about, which we all know has to happen, I became absolutely obsessed with the idea of trying to prove it to our government before they go headlong into coal and nuclear even further. And I wanted to know, does Worldwatch provide such a service to come and assist us with providing a more technical version of Georges Monbiot's Heat? Thanks.
We're not doing it yet, but we're very willing to talk to you and your group about how we can be helpful. I should mention that while we've started to work in developing countries and picked small island states first because they pay such an economic price for their reliance on imported fossil fuels and therefore are maybe a very good showcase. In the end of the day, we need this in all countries, and that very much involves the developed world. In our global status report, we found out that more than 50% of renewable energy is now produced in developing countries. I think there's a lot of, this is pretty exciting. This is not a rich country's phenomena, a little hobby or play toy anymore. This is really starting to penetrate the global energy market and the energy market all across the globe. So there's a lot of reasons that will speak for China as this century's biggest energy market, India, this century's second biggest energy. Both countries that are very reliable on the import of fossil fuels really don't have an alternative to develop in any other way than with sustainable energy based on energy efficiency and renewables, to take the lead in many regards, and there's a lot of help needed. There's of course all the reason in the world to work with developed countries in Europe and elsewhere as well to develop the roadmaps that are needed to really do this step by step. Now the European Union, as you know, has an energy roadmap now, but it's still somewhat vague, I think, but it is a great thing. It's a great first thing to start with that gives the general goals, and I think it is now about really having a step-by-step approach in place. So we're very interested in talking to you and working with you. Thank you.